Okay, everybody, so welcome to the last cast here at Ohio River Outdoors, brought to you by Jan Dill's Attorney at Law. Today I'm here with Dustin Dennis, who's going to be the new tournament director for the Ohio River Challenge Trail, and he's been the tournament director for the Fishermen West Virginia Ohio Division for 4 years now, or 5? 5 years.
5 years, yes.
Yeah, so 5 years. So I'm pretty sure everybody that fishes the trail is already pretty well aware that you've taken over as tournament director for that and for the Bass Festival, correct?
Correct.
It just for anybody that I guess isn't 100% on the loop, you've been involved in the past with it before, so it's not like you're completely new to the organization, stuff like that.
I've been fishing both the Bass Festival and the trail. I've been fishing the Bass Festival since 2015. Used to be a waiting list, and that's how I got started. Was I got a call the night before one day, and from that point forward, I've been in the festival. And then the ORC, I started fishing it the first year they came out with it, and there's only been 2 years I didn't fish it because of scheduling conflicts. But yeah, I've been fishing them the whole time, and I have tried to help out with Seven Rivers and stuff with the ORC the last couple of years as needed, but haven't really stepped up until this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, you last year or the year before, you've sat in on the meetings and stuff with them where they talked about rules and stuff like that. You stayed in contact with Sean. I know you guys have worked together for it before, so I didn't figure that this would be too big of a learning curve for you. Are you having fun with it so far? I mean,
well, I don't know. I haven't really dug into it real deep. I mean, we've had a meeting, and we do a lot of everything on the both the festival and the trail, the challenge trail. Everything goes through a committee, so it's just not one guy calling the shots. And you know, if there's an idea, you run it through and everything. But you know, last year I got a little involved in the 2024 season with it, and that's kind of what, talking with Sean and Sharon, John, and everybody, that's kind of what got me into wanting to step up to help out and everything. But you know, I'm not looking for waves. I'm just wanting to continue the whole trail in the process and to give Sean and a couple other people a break. And I brought a couple ideas to the table that we voted on, and it's a good committee of people that I think that we can implement a small amount of change over the next couple years to benefit the angler. And I think having somebody like me in there to help give them a break with some new ideas and everything, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a good time. It's got its pros and its cons. You know, people don't realize how much behind the scenes are involved with running a trail, especially the Ohio River Challenge Trail.
I mean, you're looking at typically 70 plus anglers in either division, so
yeah,
over 150 to 200 boats in both divisions year round that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I think we average right around probably 85, 87 boats per event, whether that's out of the north or the south. And then, you know, you qualify. So there's potentially 150 to 160 different boaters trying to qualify for the top 100. And it's a lot. There's a lot behind the scenes that I'm still learning and that I was not aware of. You know, the sponsorships, and like one of the big things that this will be the first time it'll be announced, and I'll go ahead and say it, is I was trying to get away from having that mandatory meeting. Everybody complains, oh, you drive an hour or two. Like, I live 2 hours away, so I drive 2 hours to go listen to a meeting for 20 minutes. I get it.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm that guy. Well, I brought that to the table, and everybody wishes we could do away with the meeting, but we have to mandate a meeting because, like, St. Mary's gives us a very nice sponsorship donation every year to do the Bass Festival.
Right.
Well, they want to see the people in the town as much as we can because they're sponsoring us. So if we take that meeting away, we just took out at least, 100 plus anglers.
Driving by in gas, stop at the gas
just
station.
For that one day.
Yeah.
We just eliminated that if we get to do away with the meeting. So moving forward is, no, we cannot do away with the meeting. The meeting has to be mandated. We have to get the anglers to come in to that area, like St. Mary's, for example, with the Bass Festival, we need the anglers to come in there for that mandatory meeting to help show our support back to St. Mary's and the Chamber of Commerce and all that, because they're giving us the sponsorship. And once I got explained that here a couple weeks back before our meeting and discussing, I said, okay, because I thought I had a foolproof idea of doing away with the meeting.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand, because I didn't understand it, and I'm sure some people still won't agree with it. But moving forward, the meeting will always be there, and I see why now. When they're giving thousands of dollars to support us every year, that's why we do have a very large payout.
So I know, like you said, a lot of the people that fish this, they might not be aware of what goes on behind the scenes when it comes to sponsors. But it's something I've talked to you about over the years of our friendship. With the sponsors that we have, I'm pretty familiar, I guess, with what goes on behind the scenes of like the requirements for sponsors, because they do have to see some sort of return on their investment. Nobody wants to just give you money just out of the kindness of their heart to write you a check to watch people fish, right? Uh, the meeting like that, like you said, 100 and plus people coming in that day. I mean, you could be looking at easily a few $1,000s that are spent, local gas station, restaurants afterwards. Like it's a smart business move on their part to draw in. I guess it's the same reason we have the weigh-ins across the way there at the park in Parkersburg. Similar sponsorship requirements.
The mayor is very generous in Parkersburg. That's why the ORC is able to guarantee what they do, is because the mayor has extended his love and his outreach to us, and that's why we do it at Point Park there. And it does create a little bit more planning and strategy on getting the boats in and out of there. And like today on day 2, we did it in the town hall parking lot or whatever that was by the magistrate's office. But we had it all figured out, to me it worked flawless. And it's hard to say something can work flawless um, when you're a detailist like I can be, but everything went so smooth at that second day of that ORC weigh in. Even the guys that were carrying the fish back in the back of the buggy and the side by side, it was really hot that day. And we were worried about the life of the fish was, our number one priority. And we had oxygen tanks running them fish back, and it was a quarter of a mile to the river, but they stayed on top of it. And we had no deaths of fish. I mean, all the fish's survival rate swam away was great, and it worked perfectly. And, I hope we can continue to do that there in Parkersburg. It was.
I got faith. So, like I brought up in the beginning of the podcast, you also do the Fisherism intro, and you've done it for several years. I've had you as a tournament director several times over the past 4 or 5 years. And the one thing I can say is your tournaments are always pretty smooth. Especially the more you've done it, right? You've definitely got a good grasp on how the concept of it runs. And as an angler yourself, who's fished a lot of tournaments, you have an idea of how you want to see things ran, how it benefits you and stuff that you didn't want to see as an angler. So I got to say, it might be a bigger platform, but I think I'm definitely not concerned. I think you'll do a great job. And like you said, you have a great committee that's staying with you, that's been a part of this for a long time. So it's not like you're out there by yourself trying to figure out how to make it all happen. I don't know if you can go into this or not. Any of it. Is Sean staying a part of this in the background? And
I talked to Sean today about people wanting to pay already for the trail and the season and the Bass Festival. And, every year, March 1st is when we open up registration for the Bass Festival. It used to be a mail out card in the mail, and then they went online and stuff. So we discussed today, this afternoon actually, that we're not going to take any entry fees for anything before March 1st. We're going to get the website turned back on March 1st, and then that's when we'll take the entries, because I've gotten probably 15 to 20 member to get fishermen that have asked to prepay in advance for the whole Northern Series or the whole Southern Series. I've had a lot of people wanting to pay for the festival already. And so that's another new announcement. I was actually going to do a Facebook post on that on the Ohio River Challenge page, but March 1st is tentatively when we're going to open up the registration for the events, and not before that. So, our first event's, I believe, in the middle of April on the Southern Division. I know there's an event at the end of April in the Northern Division, but that still gives a solid month prior for people to get, their finances in order to fish the trail and everything.
Yeah.
So
give me 1 second. one of the things I guess that's going to be a big question for all the anglers that fish this trail, and then after this, I want to get on to some other things that's not so much related to the trail, but big question, is there any big rule changes or anything that we can expect, or any major changes that are going to be brought to the table that...
No.
We're not banning livescope, are we?
No. And man, that's a conversation that...
Oh, we're going to get into it here in a second. Don't worry.
It'll be a short one. But no, there is no major rule changes. The off limits are still the same. Can
we go over the off limits a little bit just to...
Oh, now you're catching me off guard here.
I know the basic rule's always been if there's a tournament at that pool prior to, like the ramp is off limits.
None of that. The ORC, there is no off limits on the trail. On the 6 events in the Southern and Northern Division combined, there is 0 off limits. That's how it's always been. That's how it is this coming year, 2025. The only off limits in the ORC is a 1-week off limits period for the championship. We did bring it up on changing that, but we don't want to bring so much change to the table with a new director and the fishermen that it confuses everybody.
What about Bass Festival?
Bass Festival is remaining the same. I'm
going to advocate that we shut it down the week before, just like we do the ORC sometime. I know it's not something you probably do this year.
Well, I threw out I brought to the table a little unique scenario on trying to do like half a week off limits and splitting the day and being off the water by noon. That way you support the town.
Right.
You support all the other local businesses, because it's just not St. Mary's. You know, we opened up 3 different pools to 3 different ramps, lock depending or allowing, because we have no liability with that. If you choose to put in Ravenswood, or you choose to put in Belpre, or you choose, St. Mary's or whatever, that's your choice. We can't.
Do you think there's going to be any issues with locks this year?
I can't predict that.
I mean,
a lock could shut down right now and be done for 6 months. It could run 10 years. I
know the last couple of times, like by this time, there was some rumors floating around that there was going to be maintenance. Have you heard anything, or do you think?
I know I can honestly, truly say, and we all agreed, and we're going to make it very clear this year. I am going to be rewriting the rules to make them a little more less gray area. But one of the rule changes is that it is going to be very plain, bolded, and stated that we have no responsibility or liability with the lock system.
That's fair.
It's if you choose to put in Powhatan, that's your choice. If you choose to put in Ravenswood or Belpre or St. Mary's, that's your choice. That's a risk that you're willing to take just as much as anybody else. And, the lock masters don't have to let you go through.
So one thing I will bring up, because I know what's driving this last year, there was some controversy with the Powhatan Point lock. And was it like 2 or 3 weeks before the event, they announced originally it was going to be, and this was for the safety of everybody else because they might not make it back through. We weren't going to let people take off out of there. But then because of some controversy, it ended up being, you can take off out of there, but you're on your own trying to get back because there's 0 guarantees because they're doing maintenance to the locks. I've not been shy at all about my opinion on that, like the lawsuit or the rumors of the lawsuit or whatever. But really, I was hoping that every single person that was throwing a fit got stuck up there and couldn't make it back through to weigh in, because to throw a fit like they did, and I hope they're watching. I hope they all are watching to know that I think they're an idiot, because they act like crybabies about the whole situation. So Sean Douglas and whoever else was involved in Bass Festival had zero control of that situation. They didn't have some grand scheme with the lock masters to make sure that pool was shut down to prevent guys from winning. And to think about it, the fact that Sean and everybody involved does this all on a volunteer basis, and we would not have this if people like you and Sean and the Seven Rivers group and all of them weren't willing to volunteer their time to have this. To act that way, I just thought it was really unprofessional, really unbecoming. And, I don't know if you really want to share your opinion on how you feel about it, but, I'm glad you guys are taking the gray area out of it. So people, I guess, don't have that opinion coming up, again, or...
we very easily could go back to one ramp. Our sponsors would love for us to go back to one ramp.
Yeah. And
because right now we're spreading out our anglers across, over 100, 120 miles of river. We're spreading our anglers out to blast off. They would love to see all 120, 130 boats at the festival, 140 boats. They would love to see all 100 boats go out of one area.
Yeah.
But we are looking at what benefits
Us.
the angler. And the majority would love to still pick their pool or their ramp to go from. Not only is it smoother and easier to put the boats in and out and to get on the trailer and stuff, but it gives you access to maybe a certain spot you want to fish, and you can save on fuel and save on gas and all that. And
which is a big deal, because if you think about it, even with a 4-stroke motor like we have, to go from St. Mary's to halfway up the Powhatan Point pool and back is a full tank of gas all day long. And to fill up one of those beautiful boats, no matter what brand you have, is a couple $100 pretty easy, you know?
Yeah. And you know, we could easily go back and eliminate the whole ideas of separating into different pools. But that's why we're going to say, you know, like I always pick the Belpre pool, no matter if we're going out of St. Mary's or not. So I am just as much at a risk of not making it into that pool as anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and there's been times where we've barely made it through in time because of a barge in front of you or the ferry, and stuff. So it's a risk for everybody. And people that are getting upset about a lock being down, I get it's okay to be upset, but you got to understand it's out of our control.
Yeah, well,
so we can't control that.
I think there was the big controversy over it, with some people were upset that they didn't get refunded for it. But you know, it states pretty clearly in the rules that all entries are final. 1, but 2, if you're competing for one of the biggest bass tournaments in the state of West Virginia, and you can't roll with the punches, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, you're a pretty fair weather fisherman, in my opinion. I'm not saying that obviously it's not okay to be, or it is okay to be better at some pools than the other, but we've all been there before where we had a really good plan, showing up the day of a tournament, anywhere, any trail we've ever fished, thinking like, I'm cashed a check today, and it rains or the weather changes, something happens, right? And it's 100% out of your control. And just because the water's up 4 inches, like, you don't demand your money back, right?
Right.
Or because of events that everybody still fishes. That's the name of this particular game, is especially when you're going to be locking over 2 or 3 locks, that's ran by an organization that's more concerned about the commercial waterway ability rather than they are fishing. You're going to run into situations like this. So we're going to compete with weather. We're going to compete with lock operators, stuff like that. And like you said, it's 100% out of everybody's control. But I don't know, did the lawsuit ever actually happen? I don't know.
I don't know of a lawsuit that ever transpired. I don't really know. I know there was some aggravated individuals.
Oh, I had a guy that stopped me at the jug one day. Yeah, because, you know, being with the wrap boat and stuff, if we tie off there to go grab lunch, we usually have a couple people want to stop and ask us questions. And one guy, he told me that he was part of that group that was going to start some kind of class action lawsuit or something. And I just kind of like looked at him and I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that's kind of stupid. And that was the end of our conversation. But I knew there was some people that rumored it. And I remember we had Sean on the podcast and we'd talked about it then a little bit, that we didn't really air, because we only briefly discussed it. It's not like we aired it, but it was still a really sensitive subject at the time. I remember then we talked about some people had threatened up the idea of a lawsuit. Obviously it never went through, but still to think that was the first threat people went through just because of a lock being down.
Yeah, that whole lawsuit thing, it was, I heard threats about it. I heard rumors about it. I asked about it, and it was extinguished quickly. I had nothing to do with that. I wasn't really involved with it, but how I look at it is, for people to approach this organization, you know, the Ohio River Challenge organization, and to make a threat like that. How do I say this in a nice way? I don't feel they should be fishing our trail.
Yeah, I mean, don't let the door hit you.
If it's that much of a stress and a hassle and a burden to you, and you feel like that you've lost all chances, then maybe you should reconsider fishing.
I mean,
trail.
To be fair, up until they announced that there was no hope of the locks being open, my complete plan was to fish Powhatan Point. I had a way better pattern, I guess, or I was into the fish more at Powhatan than I was at St. Mary's. But, you know, I'm just used to things changing. I mean, it is what it is. You know, again,
I was talking to one team, a very well-known team that.
Are you finally ready to buy that new pontoon boat for the family or the new bass boat for yourself? Or maybe you even just need good, reliable, affordable service for the boat that you already have? Well, either way, you can get all of that at Seven Rivers Marine in Coolville, Ohio. Personally, I have trusted them with all of my marine needs for years, and honestly, you can't ask for a better group of people. Give them a call today at 740-846-0062. Again, that's 740-846-0062. Hey, are you or somebody you know a veteran that needs help fighting the VA for the benefits that you deserve? If so, you need to give Jan Dills a call. I can say from personal experience that Jan Dills and her group of attorneys will fight for you to the bitter end. If you're fighting the VA, you need the attorneys that won't take no for an answer. Give Jan Dills a call today at 877-755-7183. Hey, y'all. It's Jordan with the Getting Bit Fishing team, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thanks for checking out our podcast, The Last Cast, filmed in the one and only Ohio River Outdoors, located at 13520 Emerson Avenue, Williamstown, West Virginia. If you've never been here before, this place has absolutely everything a fisherman can need. Come swing by today. Come see Doug. Trust me, if you've never been before, it's worth the trip.
Loves Powhatan, and they had a direct phone line to the locks, and they went up there and came back. But the lockmaster apparently called them and told them they needed to be back around noon or something like that. Now, don't quote me on exact times, but some people have that connection to where they were able to do it, and they were willing to open that lock up for them. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. It doesn't affect me any.
Yeah.
You know, if you take that risk, that's you. You know, like you were talking about variables. Here's a big variable. I had planned on going into a backwater. I had my heart set on it in the festival this year. Went to go get in the backwater, and the water was down. Could not get into it. Did I get upset? No. I mean, it's you gotta plan. You gotta understand that there's going to be things that are going to prevent you from doing things, and so you can't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, yeah, history has proven when I go into that backwater with my partner Matt and I go into that backwater, we can normally satisfy what we're looking for. You know, we've never caught a winning bag out of it, but we get the bites and we boost our esteem up. And so we couldn't do that. So we had to resort to plan B and basically fly by the seat of our pants, you know, to put stuff together, which we were able to put a limit together, and we had a good time. But, you know, those are variables and factors of fishing a river system. You know, one day the river could be up 2 feet, and the next day it'd be 2 feet low. That is exactly what happened a couple years ago. I fished a gravel bar and caught a limit off of a gravel bar in Belpre right out of the chute. I mean, right out of the chute on the north end of the pool. And the very next day, my partner, my old partner, Clarence, him and I went there the very next day, and it was completely out of water.
Yeah.
So what do? You just go somewhere else and fish.
We had that happen actually 2 years ago in the Bass Festival. We'd spent a whole week down the Little Canal. It was actually in the same spot where I think it was the previous year we had won a tournament there towards the end of the year. What was the name of that trail that used to be around? The Buddy Trail. We'd won one of their tournaments.
Ohio River Buddy Trail.
Yeah, we
Joe
won.
Mitchum.
Yeah, we won one of their tournaments there the year before. So we'd pre-fished a similar area for Bass Festival, and we had been shaking off like 2 limits of fish every day. And then for the whole week, we didn't hook any of them. And there was like 4 really good spots that I was like, man, I'm going straight there. And I knew we were going to catch a limit. I knew we were going to have a good tournament. And sure enough, we get there that morning and they dropped the water, and the trees that we'd been flipping were out of the water. So the fish, the fish weren't there anymore.
I love it.
So last thing really about the trail before I get into some other fishing stuff, whenever it comes to some of the rules of the trail, one of the questions I've been asked, people kind of curious about, when it comes to fishing with an alternative or fishing by yourself, what's the rules to make it to the championship? Can you fish, like if you wanted to fish all 3 tournaments by yourself but have a partner picked out and you're fishing with him, he just couldn't make those 3 tournaments, is that legal, or is it like one alternate, one by yourself and one with a partner?
Actually, I never fully answered the last question. Yeah, we kind of got sidetracked there. To answer about the off limits on the festivals from Wednesday on, prior to Saturday,
Okay.
blast off. It's the same as last year. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is off limits. The reason why we decided as a committee to do that is a very small percentage of people actually fish all week.
Right.
And so it's not really hurting those people that want to take a week off. It still allows people to come and fish on Monday and Tuesday like they did last year, but it also gives the river a break. And you can't really see a lot statistically off of 1 year, but the weights last year in general our average weights were higher than the other previous years. Now, yes, the water was more stable, but I think and us as a committee, we agreed on this. We think that keeping people off the water for those 3 days prior to the event, it gives the fish a break, and it allows those fish to kind of move into a pattern. And yeah, it might not be maybe something you found on Tuesday, but you can spend a part of a day to find it on day one of the festival, and you can capitalize. So that was that we didn't change. It stayed. Like I said, there wasn't really any changes in the trails going forward. I'm just going to make some things a little more clear with the rules. Now, to answer your question about the partner in the trail, you are allowed one substitution. So, Mike, I fish with Matt Cronin. If Matt is unable to fish an event, I can have one substitute.
So do you have to announce your partner at the beginning?
When you sign up, you will.
Okay.
When you sign up.
So could you fish by yourself for 2 hours?
You can fish by yourself for the trail, but you have to have a partner for the championship.
So you don't have to answer this, but what's your opinion on people like cherry picking events? Let's say their plan is to make it out of the Northern Division, and they have a partner they fish with the Northern Division, but they show up for just the Belpre tournament to fish by themselves to try to cash a $2,000 check.
More power to them.
Good deal.
More power to them. Everybody's got a chance.
Yeah, I was going to say, the reason I asked you that question, I kind of knew your answer. I just know that historically, you've never really had an issue with people cherry picking, but I know that some people have, opinions on stuff like that about people cherry picking trails and stuff. But ever since I've followed your trails, and for anybody that's concerned about how the trail's going to be ran now, the rules are always very well set. But as far as, I guess, getting pissy or having really strict, I don't know when you say strict, but just nitpicking stuff. It's not something we ever dealt with, right? Pretty relaxed trail.
No, my thing is I can be the nicest guy in the world and I can be the meanest guy in the world. If I got to lay the law down, I'm going to do it. But rules are rules. If you're supposed to be in at check-in at 3:30, don't show up at 3:30 and 30 seconds. Don't show up at 3:30 and 5 seconds.
Really show up at 3:29 would be the right idea.
Don't put me or our group of people that are running the trail, don't put us in that position to be the bad guy. None of us want to say, hey, you showed up 30 seconds past the allotted time you're supposed to be in. We're going to have to DQ you. None of us want to make that. None of us want to say that. Yeah. I don't want to be put in that position, but I am going to have to. I promise you, I will have to do that this year.
Oh, I know you
And
will.
I don't want to.
Yeah, I know you
will. But the rules are rules. You know for 7-8 hours what time you're supposed to be in.
Yeah.
And if your boat breaks down, I'm sorry that I will do all that I can to try to get you back to that ramp at your weigh-in time. Classic example with Fishermen. What was it? Last year, 3 boats broke down on Smith Mountain. And I'm in it too. I'm in it for the points. I'm in it for the money. I'm in it for it all. And I spent 3.5 hours riding my boat around to make sure those people got back. Now, am I going to do that for the Bass Festival? Probably not.
There's a lot of money on the line.
A lot of money on the line. And being a director, I don't want favoritism to be involved on this. But what I am saying is if you say, hey, I'm sitting up in Ben's Run area, just above, St. Mary's and Ben's Run area, my boat's broke down. Can you see if someone can give me a ride back? I'm going to do my best to make a call to find somebody that I may know that might be passing through so you can put your fish in a fish bag and one of you can ride back in to make it to the weigh-in. And if you can't, I'm sorry, but I will do my best to help you out. I want everybody to get home safely. I want everybody to weigh their fish. I want everybody to catch fish. But at the end of the day, the rules are the rules.
Yeah.
And we all have to sign our name to them. We all have to know about them. We all have to be aware of them. And we have to follow them.
Yeah.
So, I you just gotta follow the rules about that. And cherry picking and stuff, it can guys buy into events? Sure, buy in.
Yeah. It's
That
just
is
more money for everybody else if
just
they
more
don't
money.
win.
It's the same amount of money in the kitty. And if you think you can do good on 2 events and not have to show up for the third event and make the cut, that's your business. I'm not going to guarantee it. Nobody
Yeah.
can guarantee it. That's your business. So you do what you want on that, but
So speaking of Smith Mountain, I can't remember if I told you at the ramp that day, but I've I've never once been late to a weigh-in ever, except Smith Mountain. I pulled in like there was 10 seconds left to go. That was the only time I'd almost been late to a weigh-in. And what happened for anybody who's ever fished Smith Mountain, or if you haven't, look at this place on the map. It's a really big windy lake, right? And there's a lot of fingers on it. And anyways, we pull out of the cove that we had been fishing, and I took off. I thought I went the right direction. And for like 15 minutes, we drove the wrong direction. And finally, I was just like looking around, and I just looked down at my Hummingbird, and I see that the red line was the other direction from where I've been driving. And I was like, oh my goodness, we might not make it back. And then to make matters worse, I had just gotten the Battle Bird and I had an undersized prop on it. So the fastest the boat would run was like 52 or 53. I mean, the whole time I was just like, oh my goodness, this is miserable. I remember like Lips was looking at his watch like while we were pulling in. He was like, we're going to make it. We're going to make it.
There's been many events where I've pushed it down to the last, give myself a minute to get in. And I got an eye opener on Smith Mountain 3 years ago. I decided I was going to give myself an extra 15 minutes to get in early. And I said, I'm going to hit a spot near the ramp and flip some laydowns. And I got about 6-7 minutes from the ramp, and I busted an ear off my prop. And it took me about 8-9 minutes to change it out, to get over to the bank and get off into the water and change it. But if I didn't give myself that 15 minutes, not only would have been late to my own tournament, I would have had to DQ my own self. So I gave myself a 15-minute window to flip like 4 laydowns. And when it all came down to it, I had about 4 minutes left when I got to the weigh-in. And I said to my partner, Joe, at the time, I said, on these bigger lakes, I'm definitely going to give ourselves a 15-20-minute window to get closer to the ramp, because if I would have been pushing it like I always done, we wouldn't have made it. And so that opened my eyes. And on the river, we always try to get back to the weigh-in as close as possible, and we'll stop and fish a couple spots like all the other 75, 100 boats in front of you do. But we'll try to get within trolling motor distance of time, and I think that's a really smart thing to do is not push it to the last second if possible.
Kind of crazy that, I guess it's a good way of seeing that God always looks out for you in a weird way. So like you said, you always push the limit, and for whatever reason, the day that your prop decides to bust an ear was the one day that you decided to leave a few minutes earlier. I don't know. I guess it's kind of like there's been tournaments that we've just had outstandingly good luck in, and for no reason we decided to fish a spot that we've never fished before. I think a lot of times things just happen because they were meant to happen that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always a plan. I strongly feel that God's got a plan and everything's in place, and you just play his hand out. So
can I make one, before we get off the topic of the challenge trail, can I make one suggestion? You did this for me with your trail, but we used to always play the national anthem.
Already trying to put that in the works again.
Okay, awesome.
What I'm going to need to do is I need to get my hands on a megaphone.
Okay.
I didn't do it on a couple of the events in the Fishers of Men because of the way it all went down, and it last year, and it bothered me a little bit. That was your request, and I feel that's a very respectable request. We used to do it on the festival and stuff, and it has gotten away from it with COVID.
COVID's when it changed.
COVID's when it changed, and you know what? I don't want that tradition to be lost. Not only out of respect, but I just think it's good to do. So yes, I want to get my hands on a megaphone, and I want to play the national anthem at the events. Even though we're not all at the same ramp, I would like for whoever's running each ramp to to play that, and that is going to be my request.
I
So
have an idea that might help you out with the loudspeaker situation. CA House of Music right up the road here. As much advertising opportunity as it could be for them, I guess, in the area. Um, Maybe wouldn't hurt to approach them about a sponsorship or something like that to play the national. See if they cut you guys some kind of deal on a loudspeaker or something like that. Like you said, I don't really know how you do it for the festival and the challenge, but if you did it like during the trail or whatever, you could easily.
the big thing is we go out of different ramps for the
Yeah,
festival and the challenge, but on the regular trail, everybody meets in either Powhatan River Point Creek or whatever that is, or you're right in front of the ramp. So a speaker, even one of them little JLG speakers, would be loud enough because it echoes across the water.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think as we get closer, if you need help trying to get some stuff set up, let me know. I'll try to reach around and figure out if I could get a hold of some equipment that we could use to make that happen
definitely.
without it costing anybody anything. So now that we got I'm assuming probably all the questions people have about the trail, I want to get on the topic of not just livescope, but electronics as a whole in our industry, right? So you've been fishing for how long have you been tournament fishing now? How many years have you been?
The very first tournament I ever fished was in Wellsboro, PA. I was 16 years old on opening day of bass season up there. They have it's called a family fishing event on this lake called Hills Creek Lake, and anybody can fish. They had biggest bass, biggest panfish, biggest this, biggest that, and I didn't have a boat, and I put a set of waders on, and I put a fish bag on my hip because I grew up in Florida and we used to wade the flats and put fish in a mesh bag. And I literally grabbed a hollow body frog and I walked around the edge of these lily pad banks and I weighed in almost 24 pounds with 5 fish on a pair of waders.
That's awesome.
I had certificates. They didn't give money away, of certificates. And I took not only big fish of the day, but I also got the most weight, and there was all these boats and stuff, and it's a trolling motor only lake to begin with, but I weighed in almost 24 pounds with 5 fish. And what's funny is still to this day, I've never came close to that weight in a tournament with a boat. But that was, so, I'll be 40 years old in 2 days. And
happy early birthday.
Thank you. I'll be 40 in 2 days. So I have been tournament fishing for 25 years or 24 years.
Just to make both of us feel old now, I know I was in my early 20s when we first met, and I think you might have just turned 31 or 32. So if it makes you feel better, it might feel like we've not known each other very long, but it's been a long time. I mean, it's been a really long time. So since that time, the day that you was fishing in waders, you bought your first boat, over the course of time, you've seen electronics just like everybody else. They have changed. In the last 5-6 years, they've really, like, there was some minor progression through the 2000s. And then the last 4 or 5 years, we have skyrocketed with advancements to where you could see each scale on a fish now. Right. The first question I have is, what's your opinion on, do you think that this is negatively affecting our fish at all, or the waters? I mean, I understand there's going to be fish that necessarily weren't getting stressed before, that people weren't fishing for before, they're getting fished for now. But if other fish could survive getting fished for all those years, I mean, these fish can probably survive getting fished for. Do you think it's helping us or hurting us?
Anytime something is implemented in this world, whether it's fishing, hunting, vehicles, there's pros and cons. There's statistics that are involved. Do I feel it's going to have a negative impact? I think it's going to it already has brought a lot of knowledge to the fishing world. And what I mean by that is, when I first heard of livescope and saw it with the Garmin and I saw guys running around, and back home in PA, there's a guy that he was the first person I ever knew that had a Garmin, and he never placed in the money in this tournament. That's a 3-day tournament every day of the summer. I think we're going on year 12 right now. He never ever cashed a check in the top 6 places, and he finished like 3rd place. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey," I said, "good job, blah 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 blah." And I said, "Did you use that? Did you use that live scope?" He's like, oh man, and you would have thought he was promoting Garmin. It's the best thing in the world. And we had watched him go up to some laydowns, and he didn't even cast his rod. He sat there with his rod like this on his shoulder, and he's staring down at the screen. And he's like, I don't even cast unless I see a fish that I feel is a big fish. And that's what he did all day. And I was like, man, and I remember telling my partner, I could never fish like that. But I guess if you wanna win, that's what you got to do. But everyone wants to win, but to me, it's also about having a good time while trying to win. Now that was 7-8 years ago. Moving forward to now,
Yeah, they've gotten a lot more advanced since then.
moving forward to now that I own one,
We all do.
Are you wanting to make some renovations to your home or commercial property, but you don't want to break the bank? Well, problem solved. Call my friends Jess and CJ at Ellenboro Floors in Ellenboro, West Virginia, where you can get not only reliable, great service, but at an affordable cost. They handle both commercial and residential, and financing's available. Give them a call today at 304-869-3969. Hey, are you or somebody you know a veteran that needs help fighting the VA for the benefits that you deserve? If so, you need to give Jan Dills a call. I can say from personal experience that Jan Dills and her group of attorneys will fight for you to the bitter end. If you're fighting the VA, you need the attorneys that won't take no for an answer. Give Jan Dills a call today at 877-755-7183. Hey y'all, it's Jordan with the Getting Bit Fishing team, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thanks for checking out our podcast, The Last Cast, filmed in the one and only Ohio River Outdoors, located at 13520 Emerson Avenue, Williamstown, West Virginia. If you've never been here before, this place has absolutely everything a fisherman can need. Come swing by today. Come see Doug. Trust me, if you've never been before, it's worth the trip.
what it has taught me, and it's funny because I have said this now for 3 years that I've owned one. KVD just said it on the Zona thing. It has taught you everything I learned growing up about fishing, of learning how to read, okay, there's a point right there, so there's probably going to be shallows that extends out. Before I had mapping on my very first boat, which was a John boat and everything, you felt the bottom with a crankbait or a Carolina rig, and you had a jig. And, you used to have a lineup of rods where you'd have a crankbait, a Carolina rig, a jig, and like a fluke or a buzz bait, and then a spinner bait. And like those were like your main, you had all different levels. Now, what it has taught me is you're catching fish in areas of the lake that I spent 20, 21 years fishing and learning knowledge of that I would have never fished prior. And KVD said it the other day. He said it perfectly on the Zona thing, is I based my whole life has been spent learning how fish relate to structure, not so much as a tree or a stump or a rock pile, but depth. Fish relate to depth structure. And he said, and what livescope and forward-facing sonar has said, and I've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, is you're catching fish that are suspended cruising out in the middle of the lake that you would have never even casted a line out to prior. And that's what it has done. What I also feel is that it is going to pressure the whole lakes as a whole more, which will, in the end, I feel like make it a harder fishery over time. Will it hurt the fish? I don't think it's going to harm the fish whatsoever physically. I don't think you're going to kill the fish live scoping. I don't feel that. I don't see any evidence of that even being possibly supported. But what I do see is a smaller body of water, people that used to just pound the banks or fish a common community hole, hump, or something like that. Now, people that are utilizing live scope to their advantage, and you got to learn it, is now they're targeting fish that aren't getting hammered as much over the years. Now they're targeting those fish. So I feel, on places like Sutton, for an example, live scope is tremendous now on Sutton.
Or Erie.
Or Erie and those places. I heard one of the Johnson boys from the elites up in Canada, when they were at St. Lawrence, he said, I went to a place that I know out on the lake. He said that has always been able to catch me 5 and 6 pounders anytime I pull it up. And he said, now those fish are there, but they're really hard to find. And he said, and now when I go there, I have half a dozen boats around me. And he's like, and live scope has created that pressure. So
what I not to interrupt you right there, but so on that particular topic about the areas where there used to be a lot of fish, and since live scopes came out, you see people there now, and there's less fish there. My theory is they just moved to another area that people haven't picked up on yet. Like fish have moved for years, and I don't like in that area. He said they're harder to see, or there's not as many of them. I mean, there's probably some that have died to neutrality of being overfished or whatever, but for the most part, a lot of the fish probably just got tired of the pressure and went to a new area. I think it just makes us have to chase them more. Like they're going to catch up. They're not as dumb as people think they are, or else we wouldn't spend so much time trying to catch them.
I'm a big avid bow hunter, deer hunter, and I look at chasing a mature buck a lot like chasing a mature fish. They have three things going on in their life. They're trying to eat, they're trying to reproduce, and they're trying to survive. And just like a big buck, if you knock on that big buck's door and go in his bedding area, you're going to blow him out.
Yeah, he's going to leave.
Now, you may know where he's feeding on a daily basis in that field, just like you may know where a big bass pulls up on a flat or pulls up on a point and feeds, but that doesn't mean they stay there. So you got to find out where they're calling home at, just like a buck does. And I think that the live scope and forward-facing sonar is showing that those fish are suspending more than we've ever imagined.
I think it's also showing that you can catch fish when they're suspending.
And it's opened your world up to a lot of different baits and stuff. Another thing is what this is probably the greatest learning experience I've had with live scope is Stonewall is a very pressured lake. The banks at Stonewall are amazing to fish sometimes. You got gravel, you got sand, you got mud, you got wood, you got rock, you got bushes. Everybody knows you run a bush pattern on Stonewall, and it normally will get you bit.
I thought that was a secret.
If that was a secret, I'd have it to myself.
Well, if it makes you feel better, was it? We placed fourth in the first day of your Stonewall tournament this year, and that was the exact pattern we ran. I was looking at the map the night before, and I fished with Alan. He's really good at Stonewall, but I haven't fished with him enough to really figure out like how he thinks about the lake. But I knew a few of his spots, and while I was looking at the map, I just thought to myself, like, well, I've never tried this before, but I've seen it on Bass University. I'm going to follow the creek channel, and I'm going to like find spots where the creek channel beats up against the bank, and I want to try to find bushes there. And it's like the first spot we hit, we caught 3 keepers, and I was like, this might be something. And then the second spot we hit, anyways, I just kept my map out all day, and we just followed that pattern. And I remember the best moment as long as me and Russell have fished together, we've never caught a 5-pounder in West Virginia. We've caught 5-pounders at other lakes that we've went to you with, but a 5-pounder in West Virginia was a big goal for us this year because as crazy as it is, 5-pounders in West Virginia are a lot harder to come by than people think they are. But he caught a 5-pound largemouth. Well, it was like right at the cusp of 5. We'll call it a 5. It was like a 4, 11 something or something like that. But it was so close. But that exact pattern right there is how he caught it. Goofy little spinner bait that he had. But yeah, anyway, sorry, go.
No, what I was saying is the biggest learning experience I've seen with live scope or forward facing sonar is how many fish I see along the bank swim off the bank before you even get close. Like I love to flip. So I like to get, about, 25 to 35 feet from the bank line. And what I learned was a lot of fish I'm seeing swimming away off the banks before I even get and make that flip. So it has taught me that these fish are not only pressured, but they're smart and they're spooky. So even in this stained water up in Skin Creek and Hog Hollow, these fish are moving away before I'm even flipping. So it has taught me, now let's pull the boat back 40 feet, 50 feet, and I'm seeing these fish sitting there now, or I'm not seeing them swim away as much. And even then, and I'm seeing fish swimming away from the boat and 50, 60, 70 feet in front of the boat. And it's really opened my eyes of how much these fish are spooky. And then on the contrary, I've seen a fish from media away, 2.5 feet away, not even on a bed in the middle of the summer. I've had a fish from media away just standing there looking at me, and you flip a Cinco on top of its face and it eats it like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then you get 60 feet away from a fish and he swims away. But it's taught me a lot on fish behavior more than catching fish.
Have you noticed, this is just me personally, but The ones that I've seen, like cruising the bank, they're just stopped and you can throw a Senko in front of their face and watch them crush it. And, they're not on bed or anything. I've always noticed that comes earlier in the year, but I don't run into a whole lot of fish I can do that with towards the end of the year. Do you think that has a lot to do with they haven't been pressured all?
I think it's pressure.
Do you see a similar pattern there? Like, do you run into a whole lot of fish that you can do that with towards the end of the season?
No, you don't, and you don't see a lot of fish along the banks. But I'm not a pro or the most knowledgeable fisherman in the world, but I tend to think I know a little bit more about it than some, and I've grown up in Florida and lived in PA and New York and all these places, and there's seasons in the north and PA and New York. There's seasons, and when those seasons open up, the first week or two, I feel like those fish are dumb. You see fish all over the banks now. Yes, they're still around because of the spawning period, but the fish are all over. They're feeding, they're cruising, and then come middle of summer, you'll be lucky if you see a fish.
Yeah,
and pressure is everything, and live this forward facing sonars let me see that how much pressure is involved. I use this analogy a lot. A lipless crankbait or a square bill, it rattles, it thumps. That vibration, the fish's lateral line, those fish key on that vibration, and that's what draws them to find their food, and they eat. Well, think about that trolling motor. Think about that boat. If that little 2.5 inch, 3 inch, 2.5 to 3 inch square bill is making that much vibration that bass is feeling that through a couple feet of water, and it triggers it to respond and want to attack. Imagine a 20-foot boat weighing 2,500 pounds. Empty is floating through. What kind of vibration and wake is it paid? So
I've often put a lot of thought to that.
Movement on a boat, vibration and stuff, I think plays a key role later in the year when those fish are pressured and everything. It's like, you go to Stonewall on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Everyone catches 20 pounds at Stonewall. All you hear, I caught 20 pounds Wednesday. I caught 20 pounds Wednesday. And I believe everybody when they say that. But then when Saturday comes, most of these people are struggling to catch 10, 11, 12 pounds, me included. And I feel like those fish they feel the pressure of that boat running down that river, down the river system. They know, okay, the people are here, there's pressure, and it pulls them fish back off the banks.
Definitely.
And so pressure to me is huge. And
so I have a theory on the noise of a boat, by the way. Any instructional video you watch, they always say that when you're throwing like a crankbait or a swim bait or anything like that, you want to throw it to where it's coming back with the current, to where it has a more natural presentation, which, I mean, that does make sense that bait fish follow the current and fish follow the current. But I honestly think more the reason you get more bites with that, because realistically, how many baits do we throw that don't look anything like anything in the water and the fish still bite them? So I don't think the realistic presentation is as big of a deal sometimes. But I think whenever you're downstream and the current's coming towards you, that a lot of that vibration and sound is also going downstream because it's being pushed that way by the water. So if you're throwing ahead of you, the fish are less likely to hear the noise of the boat and stuff like that. Because I agree with you. I think, especially when you're flipping or doing any kind of close presentation, all that noise of you and your partner walking around the boat and opening up deck lids and dropping deck lids. And I'm telling you, one of my biggest pet peeves on a boat, man, is whenever we're fishing a tournament, like, softly put that deck lid. Just do everything softly. There's no reason to just wham and then wham and then walking around, just because I thoroughly believe the fish can hear that. And when they do, just like you said, like chasing a mature buck, you can catch fish, but by not doing things perfect. But if you want to catch that 1 6-pounder that's sitting there and not the 2 or 3 2-pounders sitting around him, he didn't get that big by being dumb. You know what I mean? Like, that fish has been around a long time. I don't know. Do you think that makes any sense, or does it?
Well, if you're, like I said, I relate deer hunting a lot with fishing. My biggest bucks I've ever harvested with a bow, it was the first day I ever hunted that spot. I did the scouting with maps online or scouting from a distance, and I wanted to get into an area, but I never stepped foot in that area. And the day I did, I killed my biggest bucks. My top 4, I was just talking with my buddy, my top 4 out of my 5 biggest bucks, which are all over 140 inches. Some of them here in West Virginia and some of them in PA and some of them in Missouri. All of them were the very first time I ever hunted that spot. And how I relate that to fishing is that deer had no idea I was there until it was too late. When he messed up, it was too late. And I feel like sometimes with catching a big fish off guard is fishing an area that you don't think the fish are at.
Yeah.
And I think forward-facing sonar has brought that into this world as, hey, I don't know why that fish is out there 15 feet down in 65 foot of water, but him, or her, I should say, her and 3 of her fat friends are sitting there with her too.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you just caught, 3, 4, 5, 6 pound fish out in the middle of nowhere, and you can't explain it, but maybe that's just it. Those fish are out there more than what we ever thought. And I think that's where forward-facing sonar is such an educational tool. And to be competitive, the old saying, if you're not scoping, you're hoping. This day and age,
it's true.
This day and age, on a money-based situation in your brain, you kind of almost have to resort to that to a certain degree.
On the other side of the live scope, and this is something else I wanted your opinion on. There's a lot of anglers out there. There's one that I don't think he's a pro anymore, but a former pro that's pretty popular on YouTube that has some pretty strong opinions against forward-facing sonar. He calls it spotlighting. Do you think that, as far as a profession or as an industry, do you think that it is something that pro anglers should use, or do you think it's an unfair advantage? Do you think it's making us better or worse, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Do you think it's something that we should? I think
it's, how do I say this? I know where I want to go with this conversation. If you look at, I grew up watching KVD and Denny Brower and Greg Hackney and Rick Clunn and all them guys are really struggling now for the most part. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying that they're tending to struggle on top of these big events, and the younger generations are excelling. And what I think it is the older guys are still utilizing how they learned how to catch fish 20 years ago, which is fine. It got them to where they're at today, and they've forgotten more on water than I'll ever learn. But these newer guys, I feel like a lot of these newer guys aren't learning the actual knowledge of the habitat and the way a fish lives. They're just going out with the live scope and they're trying to catch fish using their screens, and more power to them. I've caught a handful of fish in tournaments on live scope. I will say firsthand that I've caught a couple fish on the Ohio River that if it wasn't for live scope, I wouldn't have caught them.
Yeah.
Hands down. I took them to the scales.
I don't think anybody, no matter how much they'd like to complain, can say that they haven't caught.
But I don't rely on it. And in a lot of events, I turn it off, because what I have found is sometimes I get so caught up trying to chase and find a fish to eat that I'm taking away the whole fun of fishing. And it's not fair to my partner.
Yeah.
My old partner, Joe, he hated it. He told me flat out, he's like, if you're going to sit up there and stare at that screen, just take me back to the ramp. And I laugh, and I get it. It's not fair to them. Now, he did sometimes come up, like, for example, he caught a 6-pounder at Smith Mountain the one year on a jerkbait. We saw it on live scope, swimming from left to right. And I went to wind.
Hey, are you or somebody you know a veteran that needs help fighting the VA for the benefits that you deserve? If so, you need to give Jan Dills a call. I can say from personal experience that Jan Dills and her group of attorneys will fight for you to the bitter end. If you're fighting the VA, you need the attorneys that won't take no for an answer. Give Jan Dills a call today at 877-755-7183. Are you finally ready to buy that new pontoon boat for the family, or the new bass boat for yourself? Or maybe you even just need good, reliable, affordable service for the boat that you already have? Well, either way, you can get all of that at Seven Rivers Marine in Coolville, Ohio. Personally, I have trusted them with all of my marine needs for years, and honestly, you can't ask for a better group of people. Give them a call today at 740-846-0062. Again, that's 740-846-0062. Hey, y'all. It's Jordan with the Getting Bit Fishing team, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thanks for checking out our podcast, The Last Cast, filmed in the one and only Ohio River Outdoors, located at 13520 Emerson Avenue, Williamstown, West Virginia. If you've never been here before, this place has absolutely everything a fisherman can need. Come swing by today. Come see Doug. Trust me, if you've never been before, it's worth the trip.
Up, and I went to fire in front of it, and I backlash. Get excited, you backlash. The wind was in our face, and he laughed, and he looks down and he wings it right over to where it was going, and it smoked his jerkbait. Now that was really cool. My co-angler, my partner, he came up, he caught a nice, it was like 5.96 or something on on a jerkbait on livescope, and it worked. But not every story ends that way. And I've seen a lot of issues and controversy about where, the co-anglers, it's not fair. There's a couple local hammers in West Virginia that refuse to fish as a co-angler anymore because of that reason. So to get back to your question, on a professional level, if you're going to make a career out of fishing, I feel livescope, as long as the law of the tournament states you can use it, I think you would be foolish not to utilize it to your fullest advantage. You look at the elites last year. Every event but one, I believe it might have been two, but every event was won on livescope.
Yeah.
To be competitive in a fishing world for a life, for an income, for a salary for your family, you have to utilize livescope this day and age. Now, the National Professional Fishing League, they just banned livescope. I saw that. I just saw a post about that and everything. They banned it, and that's gonna
hurt them.
That's gonna even the playing field, because a lot of them guys were dominating on some events, and now I think you're going to see a change. I think you're going to see the guys that are more traditional know how to read side scan. When down scan and side scan came out 15 years ago, that was revolutionary change from the old 2D. I'm not going to lie. 8 years ago, I was video gaming with 2D. You set your ping up on 10 on Lowrance. I had a Lowrance on my Stratus at the time, and that I sold, and I was at St. Clair in 24 foot of water in the main channel, and I had my ping set up on 2D max at 10, and I could watch my drop shot go up and down. There was about a 1 second delay, but you could see a mark, and you could see your drop shot go up and down, and I set my transducer on the back of the boat, pointed down, and my partner, Joe, could drop straight next to the driver's console, straight underneath the boat, and he could watch his. And we literally caught a whole limit to qualify in nationals on day 2, live scoping per se on 2D.
Yeah, it's
incredible.
Before the 2D people were doing it with flashers. I mean,
exactly.
Ice fishermen are doing it for years.
Flars, exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing. So now that's just taking it to a more advanced level. That's just like, 25 years ago, cell phones were a bag that rode around on the floor of your vehicle. Yeah. And now, it's just, we got the whole world in our hands now. And I just told somebody this. People don't realize you got the whole world at your fingertips, literally. Anything you could ever want in this world, you can buy and not have to move.
Yeah.
So technology in the bass world, it's kind of the same, I'm all about advancing and seeing what technology brings. But on a competitive world, if you're wanting to make a living in a competitive world, in the fishing world, you have to utilize livescope. Can you win without it? Sure. Absolutely. Can you make a living without using livescope? I 100% feel that if you have the knowledge and the capability, you can. John Cox is a testimony to that.
Yeah.
But why bring a knife to a gunfight?
Yeah, well, that and the way I see it too is you talked about like Greg Hackney and some of the more tenured guys in the sport who back in the day, that they found something and that's what got them to where they're at now. Something new that they figured out that just started whacking fish, right? And that's been the history of this industry since people started getting paid to do it. Is everybody, just like in racing, these guys are always looking for some way to get a competitive edge over the other guy, right? And for years, from the A-rig to the Senko to 2D sonar when it first came out, side scan, all that stuff, somebody ended up figuring it out, becoming really good at it, and just waxing everybody else, for a year or two. At one point, they talked about banning the A-rig, right?
It's banned.
Okay, so
Bass Nation has it, I think.
Yeah,
banned,
so to my point there, we've always had new technology entering the bass world, and there's always been one generation that used to have their rock stars that started falling off because some new generation that was savvy to whatever the new technology was, even if it was a Senko or an A-rig or something like that. And you always have people who kind of have hard feelings about, hey, you're not doing it the way that we used to, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, in every industry there is that I can think of, it progresses. And if you want to keep up with the industry, you have to progress. Just like here at Ohio River Outdoors, if 10 years ago, Doug decided these are the only baits I ever want to sell, and I'm never bringing in anything new because I just don't agree with it. we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this podcast in here right now because it just advances. And then you just talk about the MPLF. I honestly think if they ban livescope, they're just going to hurt themselves. I mean, I see the argument because it is boring for me as a spectator to watch somebody stare at a screen for 8 hours or whatever whenever you're trying to watch somebody fish. And you want to hear actual strategy, not just somebody watch livescope. But people don't buy tickets to come watch us fish like they do football or NASCAR or anything like that. So if we want to pay $50,000 to win tournaments, we need sponsors to give us that money, because that's the only place it comes from. This whole industry is revenue based. It's all about marketing. There's no tickets being sold or anything like that. And I mean, even as far as merch goes, you don't see people wearing Greg Hackney jerseys around like you know what I mean? So if we want to survive, we have to accept the fact that we're more of a marketing tool than we are an athlete. And don't get me wrong, it takes endurance to fish all day. But if you're trying to make money off this, you have to consider yourself a marketing tool. And if we're going to be a marketing tool, one of the biggest drivers in the industry is electronics. I would say, Lowrance, Humminbird, and Garmin probably make a quarter of the $1 billion made in this revenue every year. If you tell them, hey, we don't want you to advertise your newest, latest, and greatest technology on our platform, they're not going to give you money anymore. And whenever you start taking away money from electronic companies, you're left with basically just bait companies and boat companies and stuff like that. But you can only stretch that so far before you're going to run out of money. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm leaving this coming week to go down to Harris Chain for the Big Bass Tour. And one of the new rules they implemented is you're not allowed to have more than one forward-facing sonar on your boat.
I can agree with that.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a strong believer of that. And here's why. I grew up in a very non-wealthy family. Not everybody is blessed with wealth, and not everybody has the capability to afford $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 setups per unit. And these guys that are running with $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in electronics going against a guy that can't feasibly afford $1,000 to $3,000 electronics, it does create a very unfair advantage. And not that we need to make the whole world an equal playing field, but I do like that there is a restriction of maybe only one forward-facing sonar on a boat in a tournament, because it allows a more level playing field. So if like you have it and I can't afford it, okay, he's only got one, and it's not so bad. But I've been on a boat that has two pieces of forward-facing sonar, and I'm going to tell you, wow, that's all I can say. Does it make them a better angler? I can't answer that. Does it mean they're going to catch more fish?
Probably.
I can't answer that. But what it does is it allows them to see so much more in the water and increase their chances. And another big thing that I'm going to say, so people can understand my point of view in it, is if you have forward-facing sonar, are you going to catch every fish? Absolutely not. Are you going to win every tournament? Absolutely not. But it's just a tool to help you try to be more successful, and it's not easy.
So as much, yeah,
it's not. I go to a small, I'm not going to mention lake, a very small non-mentioned lake, public lake, to practice my forward-facing sonar in the summer, and it's incredible offshore there. And what it has taught me is I can see the fish, I can watch them chase a bait, I can watch them move away from a bait or towards a bait, but they don't always hit it. And it's really opened my eyes that it's not as how TV makes it seem. You see these pros, they throw, oh, there's one, and they catch it. It's not like that. Now, smallmouth's a different story. Smallmouth are a little easier to catch. You get up on Erie or St. Clair or, a lot of these bigger fisheries, and they are a little easier to catch, it seems, the smallmouth are, than a largemouth. But by no means is it any easier. You still got to find the fish to catch it. But one thing I will say about forward-facing sonar in a negative atmosphere is, and I'm probably going to step on some toes on this, is looking at it from a young angler's perspective. These high school students and these college anglers that are going out and competing, a lot of them don't have the years in their life to have the knowledge that me or somebody that's been doing it for 20 plus years, they don't have that knowledge of the fishery, of how the fish react. They're going out there and they're using their graph, to its fullest potential to catch the fish, and that's great. That's incredible. That is a strategy and a skill and an art in itself, is to be proficient and successful with that forward-facing sonar.
And to have the patience
and all that. But what it's not teaching them is it's not teaching them how they can say, okay, well, the skies and the conditions and the temperature and the time of the year, and this time of the year, the fish prefer a hard structure over soft structure. If they don't gain that kind of knowledge, then all they're doing is they're just going out relying on that screen. But if they took that screen away, I think you would see a tremendous decrease in the amount of fish and the bags being caught, is because they're not learning how to find those fish without that graph. And mapping is another big thing. To me, in my opinion, the greatest success I have seen in the technology world is mapping. I mean, I can pull up my map now and I can see holes and craters and ditches and cuts and road beds and underwater structure and housing developments that are housing rumbles, and never knew existed because of mapping. I think mapping is the most vital thing you can learn on a piece of electronics.
I agree with that.
And that is to me the one thing that I think can really separate an angler, is if they learn how to use their mapping and that sonar of forward facing together, I think they could almost be untouchable.
So I think two things I'd like to point out there. One, whenever it comes to people actually like the younger generation learning the lay of the lake and how different conditions affect fish and stuff like that, I do agree with you that forward-facing sonar has made that go away. But I think that people who still have that knowledge, if they would buckle down and learn forward-facing, I agree that it would make you really lethal at it. Because for me, personally, when I've come like forward-facing sonar, I've always used my other electronics and what knowledge I have to figure out where I want to fish, like the areas I think are going to be high percentage areas, and then I use my live scope to see if there's fish there, or to see if they're set up the way that I think they're set up. But I've never went out and just scanned the bank only using my live scope the whole time to find fish. So, I mean, I think if you don't have the knowledge of how to fish without the live scope, you're going to waste a lot more time trying to find the fish, where, guys like you or I, or guys better at it like Alan White, or, even professionals like Greg Hackney and those guys, you can do a lot more damage if you can eliminate the time, trying to figure out where they're at. But another thing I think, and you brought this up earlier, when it comes to live scope, I've never really thought of it this way, but now that the younger generation is spending more time just looking at the screen and not figuring out the habitat, I've never been anti live scope, but I do think, and I do realize now that maybe there is some aspect of the respect for the atmosphere, the nature you're in, might become lost eventually, because if you're not paying attention to what's happening in nature and you're just paying attention to that screen, you're probably not going to appreciate nature as much. Imagine if you were hunting with a VR headset the whole time or something. It's not the same feeling. And I guess, again, I'm not anti live scope, and I again think anybody that wants to say that it's spotlighting, they really don't know what they're talking about, because it's not spotlighting. The fish will run away from you. But I do agree, I guess, now that I thought about it after you brought it up from like that aspect, that there probably is a little bit of respect for the environment that we use to enjoy that could be lost if people weren't paying attention to, a lot of the respect you have for nature is just how beautiful you find it, and the fact that you don't want to be the guy that screws it up. But even if you like it, or if you don't like it, or even if what I just brought up might concern you, at the end of the day, it's not going to go away, I don't think, unless...
No, it's not. The industry's making too much revenue off of it. It will never be banned.
And I don't want to see it banned.
I don't think you will ever see it ever banned fully across the board. But the Big Bass Tour made it to where you're allowed to have one.
I think that's fair.
And I think that's fair, because it got to a point last year where I saw pros, and this is actually genius, that there was no rules against it. And at the end of the day, those pros are trying to make the biggest dollar they can make at the end of the day. So they were putting live scope and using it on the side of their boats like side scan.
Yeah.
So they were literally able to scan 120, 150 feet on each side. So they're doing 300 feet of live scoping while idling. So instead of doing side scan, they're going down through and they're marking actual fish. And with how crisp these electronics are, you can tell if it's a bass or not. And they're even better at it because this is what they do for a living. So these guys are able to find these schools of fish and eliminate time and water and stuff. But it takes time. It takes time to utilize this stuff. You're not just going to go out there on the first day you've ever opened it up and catch fish. You may catch one or two, but it's not like that. It's going to take time and learning. And I don't want to take any type of success from the young anglers, the college guys, the high school guys, the middle school guys. I don't want to take any of their successes and accomplishments away of what they've done utilizing live scope, because that's an art and a talent that I probably will never have. But
you've gotten, I mean,
but I feel like that they are missing out on a lot of knowledge because they're relying on it too much. Like I said, I growing up, you had a crankbait. Used to use bomber crankbaits, big bomber crankbait fan, and Normans and Mans, and you had a jig, and you had a fluke, and you had a buzzbait, and you found where the fish are in the water column by using that. You felt your way along the bottom, throwing a crankbait. Oh, there's a rock, or there's grass, and now it's like you don't even need to pick up a rod. I was watching a guy on a YouTube channel how he scouted for a big event. And he idled around for 3 days on the Chickamauga and never casted a rod for 3 days because he was marking grass, he was marking hard bottoms, and he was marking schools of fish. And then he went out and he landed in the top 5. And that right there was a testimony of commitment. He did not have fun in 3 days of practice.
Yeah.
But it's his life, it's his job, it's his livelihood. So he relied on the technology to be successful. To be successful in the fishing world, you got to rely on technology nowadays. You really do.
So one last thing before we get off live scope. Even though you say like it's not a skill set that you've mastered, you've still put a lot of time into messing with live scope. And just over the, like I said, 10 years we've known each other, I've always known you to be the kind of guy that whenever you want to get into something, you definitely fiddle with it a lot. Watch a lot of videos and stuff and really work on trying to figure it out. So I know you've put some work into live scope. Is there any hints or tips that you're willing to share with the audience that you think is worth knowing about live scope that maybe you found out while you were messing around? Maybe like a better bait to use or a good tactic of.
I really don't use live scope as much as you probably think I do. I have it. I use it to see more if there's fish in the area than to actually sit there and throw a bait on their head. I still to this day don't utilize ball head jigs and straight tail minnows. And if you look at any live scoper, that's like the number one bait in their hand.
Is ball head jigs
they're
and
using
minnows.
Like a 2 or 3 inch little bait with an 1/8 or a 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce ball head jig. And honestly, I don't even think I have one in the boat. I'm being very real. I use it to see if there's fish around the area. If one will sit there and be still long enough for me to throw a creature bait on it or a Ned or a drop shot in front of it or work a jerk bait over the top, sure. But I really don't play the live scope game because I just don't have fun with it in tournaments. Let me rephrase that. I don't have the confidence in it.
So
confidence is key.
Do you just not have the confidence on the river with it, or do you have the confidence in general in most lakes you go to?
I don't have the confidence to bet a tournament on it yet.
Here's the weird thing for me. So I've messed with it a good bit. I've been trying to get on the train of figuring this thing out. And I've found on the Ohio River, it's a lot more challenging to dial in with because there's a lot more trash fish that you got to compete with. And I've not had a single day on the river, even fun fishing, where I've really been able to just live scope the whole time. I use it, don't get me wrong, but it's hard for me to buckle down with on the river because I've caught a lot of drum and stuff other than bass, to live scoping. Whereas when I go to Erie, there's such an abundant amount of bass there that one, I learned so much while I was up there about live scope, but 2, I would be willing to bet a tournament at Erie with live scope just because I don't know why. It's just you run into a school of fish and you can tell if they're bass because they're all bass.
I was going to say this is kind of contrary to what I said earlier because I'm a big believer that guys who don't have the electronics can still win. I will root for them from day in on day out. But when you go up to the big lakes, Erie, Ontario, St. Clair, hands down, guys with live scope are going to eat you alive.
Oh, so funny story. You say that you can win without it. The first day of the challenge, I pulled my boat in. We just loaded the boat up. Lips, who was strapping the boat down, and I was wiping the boat down. And two other guys came up to us and asked us how our day was. And I was like, we had a day, but we didn't have a good enough day to make it to day two. What about you guys? And he was like, man, I've had the best day I've ever had on the river.
Hey, y'all. It's Jordan with the Getting Bit Fishing team, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thanks for checking out our podcast, The Last Cast, filmed in the one and only Ohio River Outdoors, located at 13520 Emerson Avenue, Williamstown, West Virginia. If you've never been here before, this place has absolutely everything a fisherman can need. Come swing by today. Come see Doug. Trust me, if you've never been before, it's worth the trip. Hey, are you or somebody you know a veteran that needs help fighting the VA for the benefits that you deserve? If so, you need to give Jan Dills a call. I can say from personal experience that Jan Dills and her group of attorneys will fight for you to the bitter end. If you're fighting the VA, you need the attorneys that won't take no for an answer. Give Jan Dills a call today at 877-755-7183. Are you wanting to make some renovations to your home or commercial property, but you don't want to break the bank? Well, problem solved. Call my friends Jess and CJ at Ellenboro Floors in Ellenboro, West Virginia, where you can get not only reliable, great service, but at an affordable cost. They handle both commercial and residential, and financing's available. Give them a call today at 304-869-3969.
He said, I'm not sure, but I think we're sitting in first place right now. And I was like, no joke. And he was like, yeah. He's like, I woke up this morning and I thought to myself, man, I waste a lot of time with electronics. And he said, I unhooked every electronic from my boat. And he pointed, like, there's 4 graph mounts sitting there, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, empty. He said he didn't know what depth he was in all day. He didn't know what the water temperature was. He said he put his head down and fished. And that guy cashed, what was it, 20,000, 25,000 to win this year? Or was it just 15 to win the challenge?
The challenge?
Yeah.
I think the challenge was 25.
Yeah, so that guy cashed a $25,000 check with no electronics operating on his boat.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, it can be done.
It can be.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like Erie, Ontario.
You're going up to Erie or Lake Ontario, the big smallmouth fisheries, hands down, 100%. I am confident that you will be beat by a guy with live scope every time.
And you know what?
I really do. I think this day and age, moving forward, you go against a guy that's got live scope on those lakes versus a guy that's don't, and I think hands down a guy with live scope on those lakes are going to eat you up.
Honestly, it's fun.
It's easy and it's fun. I think around here locally, I think the fastest way to learn live scope is to go up to Erie, because you're going to see drum, you're going to see walleye, you're going to see your schools of smelt and perch, you're going to see your bass, and you can say, okay, hey, I see that's a bass. I can see the shape of it now. Or I can see that's a drum. You see the big round knot on it, and everything. And
you're actually going to catch 20 or 30 fish a day up there, too.
And then you're successful because you're catching fish on it. Like, I go to the river and you just see hundreds and hundreds of fish on live scope. And it's so hard to distinguish between a small, buffalo carp or a drum or a bass or a white bass or a hybrid and stuff like that. And every now and then I get lucky and I do catch one on live scope on the river with it. And I will say generally, it's a good one when it is. It's one that you want to take to the scales. And, for me, that's like a 2-pounder.
I mean, on the river, anything you want to take to the scales.
It's very tiresome on the river to scope. I feel, and Matt and I talk about this quite often, it's a matter of time before somebody figures out how to find fish on live scope on the river and dominates every event. And we might see it this year, but it's just a matter of time before somebody does that. But I also feel in river systems like the Ohio River, there's so much variable and change that I truly think a guy just pounding the banks with a spinnerbait has just as much chance as a guy offshore with live scope.
Yeah, and
if not more, because of the way the river lays out.
So, speaking of the river, not so much about the trail. You fished the river for a long time. And I've bounced a lot of ideas off of you about like places to fish and stuff like that on the river. When it comes to fishing the river, what's your favorite way to what's your favorite bait to throw? What's your What do you have most confidence in on the river? If you were going to just go out and say, I haven't fished the river in 3 weeks, these are the 4 baits I want to tie up.
It depends on the conditions.
Springtime.
I love flipping. Man, do I love flipping. If I could get a flip bite, I won't put it down.
I'm right there with you.
A jig. If they'll eat a jig, I won't put a jig rod down. But probably the funnest way I have catching fish on the river is topwater. I love a topwater. Not only, I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't love watching?
What's your favorite topwater bait on the river? You guys share the juice, man. There's only 75 people that watch this podcast. You don't have to
there's more than that. It's going to be a tie between a walking bait and a buzz bait. Honestly, it's conditions depending.
So,
I really, really like a Lucky Craft walking bait. Lucky Craft, Sammy. I really love a Sammy.
So my big question, and I won't make you answer this one. When it comes to size of that, like, do you have size preferences for the river, or do you let the conditions tell you that, or do you go to the river?
I'll tell you right now about that. So I've always thought you got to downsize on the river, and a couple of my buddies who fish and live here on the river, they do the exact opposite, and they have proven to me that you can throw a 5, 6, 7, 8 inch topwater bait and get the same amount of bites as you can throwing a 3 or 4 inch pop-R.
I think you get more bites with a bigger topwater bait.
I don't have the confidence in throwing those big baits yet, but I will say that I've stepped into a 5-inch walking bait on the river this past year, and what I saw show themselves was pretty impressive. And it's opened my eyes up that you don't have to always think finesse on the river. Now, did I ever land any of them? I legit never landed a fish throwing a 5-inch walking bait, but I know guys that's all they throw. But I had a lot of pops on it. So there's a learning thing there. You know, I'm trying that the Lucky Craft, I try to throw a Lucky Craft. It's got 3 treble hooks. I try to increase my odds with that using a 3rd treble hook. They're spaced out a little differently than a traditional spook or a sexy dog. So I'm trying to critique that, but the size of the bait on the river, like I flip a 4-inch creature bait.
I typically flip a 4-inch creature bait.
I flip a 4 to 5-inch creature bait. I use 5-inch Senkos. I use
What's your favorite creature bait?
I truly don't really. I basically have like 3 brands of baits in my boat. I have like Zoom Z crawls. I have Maxcent chigger crawls and tubes, and
I've never used their tubes. Do you like the Maxcent
I like
tube?
them, but they're miserable to use. They break real easy.
Yeah, I was going to say my biggest complaint about Maxcent is their durability is terrible.
The durability is terrible.
And I think it has to be because they probably have to make it softer to absorb that scent so well.
Well, it says it's naturally, it's made with natural, biodegradable fish products. So that's probably why it's, you take a Maxcent and what's funny is I was just getting the boat ready for Florida and I found a Maxcent General, 6-inch General, because I use 6-inch Generals. And it swelled up. I'm not lying to you. I bet you that thing was as big as almost as big as a Red Bull can. It swelled up so bad in the boat, So I don't really know what it's made of, And I will say that is a concern with me with the fishery. Is you use a Zoom or a Senko or a Yamamoto and it breaks down. And I'll be the first person to tell you I love eating bass, and I'm probably gonna get like crucified for this, but I keep a handful of bass a year on
I love the taste
out
of
of
bass.
Stonewall or Chautauqua or
when I go to
like
Erie,
that.
I'll keep a limit,
and I'll fillet a few out. I keep I keep the 2-pounders. I'll keep enough to feed my family and stuff. I love fresh fish. I grew up in Florida eating fish, but what I've noticed is there's been over the years I've opened up the stomach on a bass. I'm always curious, and I have seen Maxcent baits in a stomach of a bass, and it swells up so bad their stomach's bloated, like it looks like they're pregnant. But yet when you open up the stomach of a fish that might have ate a Yamamoto Senko or a Zoom or a Yum, it's broke down and it's almost decomposed. And I am concerned on the fish and how fast they're able to break down that Maxcent bait, because I am seeing a tremendous amount of.
That's wild to think about too, because as easy as they tear apart,
and everything, exactly. So
as easy as they break, you would think that the fish would be able to digest them easy, but that's one thing we really don't pay attention to as anglers too, because not just that, but think about how many guys, whenever they break off their worm or whatever, they throw the plastic over the side of the boat and don't even think about it. You know what kind of damage that does to the water, just throwing your plastic.
I try to keep all my soft plastics on. I
Oh,
actually give them to a guy. He melts them, but I actually have a bucket in the house, and I have almost 2 full 5-gallon buckets over the last 6 years of all these soft plastics from people fishing with me. You know, you tear them in there, and I'm going to be giving them to him here soon because he melts them and breaks them down. But
is it Hayward there at Seven Rivers, or?
no, it's Tyler.
I was going to say,
he melts his baits. I'm going to give them to Tyler. I keep telling him I'm going to bring him, and I keep forgetting. But no, the max scent baits are a concern for me in the digestive system of a fish. Now, maybe the acids break them down, but when I opened up a fish up in Erie, I found a Senko in a largemouth I caught in the bay, and that thing, I don't know if it was a 4 or 5 inch Senko, but that thing was probably 7 inches long and 3 inches around, and it's like, man,
I can't feel good.
Like, at what point is it going to kill that fish? You know, I don't know.
Because you got to think whatever chemicals they use to scent it with or whatever too is just sitting there in its stomach.
But it's
absorbed.
swelling up where, you know, like a Zoom bait and stuff like that, they break down, and old monsters are, you know, in Florida, you find old monsters in a fish's stomach all the time, and you grab it and it just brittle, it falls away in your hand, where Maxent, it doesn't do that. So I'm a little concerned about that. But no, my creature baits, I keep it simple. I tie my own jigs. I might use a missile D-bomb or a destroyer. I might use a Z crawl, or I might use a chigger crawl. That's basically the gist of my creature baits. So, yeah, size on the river is almost irrelevant in my opinion anymore after what I've learned the last couple of years. It goes back to what you got confidence in.
So for me on the river, when it comes to topwater baits, I don't like to downsize because I think the splash from a bigger bait is what draws the attention of the fish. So I throw like a regular, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce buzz bait. I don't throw small buzz baits. If I throw like a frog, believe it or not, the frog that I use is kind of a smaller frog, and I use it around everywhere. It's kind of funny, as long as I'm fishing. This was the first year that I actually got real dug into the frog bite. And my first frog, or the first bass that I caught on a frog this year, the first fish I ever caught on a frog, I caught a 4.5 pounder at Chautauqua. It was the second day of the tournament was up there. It might have only been 4 pounds, but I remember I just threw that frog out, and I was like, well, here we go. I'm just going to throw this until I catch something, because I was determined to learn how to throw a frog. And whenever I caught that fish, after that, you couldn't get a frog out of my hands.
I love a frog bite, and the hottest days of the year are the best days to throw a frog. And I remember I went to North Bend a few years back, and my buddy Levi Lamp, at the time I didn't know who he was, but he was in a John boat next to, it was the log jam that goes up to the river, and it was all covered with algae and stuff. And him and his grandfather were fishing, and I come up and I'm talking to him, and I actually asked him if I could fish this area, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. They were fishing for catfish or something. And I caught like 7 or 8 right there in a row on a frog.
Nice.
Whack, whack, whack. And that immediately sparked our conversation with Levi, and he friended me on Facebook, and ever since then we became really good friends. And he said he'd never seen anybody like that. And that year I kept going back to that log jam, and it wasn't the same fish every time, because some of them were big and some of them were 3, 4, 5 pounders, some of them were 1 pounders. But I remember it was brutally hot that year, and it had the algae and scum on it. But it's a frog bite, man. When they're on a frog.
And there's no more fun. There's no better way to catch a fish. It's one of the most fun bites you'll ever have, especially smallmouth on top water. That one, the second day at Chautauqua, whenever Lips caught, I think it was a 4.5 pound smallmouth. But it crushed a whopper plopper. Man, I wasn't even the guy that caught it, but to watch that happen as aggressive as a smallmouth on a topwater bite is probably the most fun you'll ever have fishing. I just can't think of a better way to catch a fish, honestly.
And they can train wreck a bait, and I've also seen them literally just slurp and roll on a bait and hit it with hardly any ripples, and they take a bait down and they be a 4 or 5 pound smallie.
I see that a lot on the river. A lot of times I'll be fishing a buzzbait, and you really have to pay attention with a buzzbait on the river, because you won't hear that big ploosh. A lot of times I just hear
Yeah.
And then oh, wow, I got a fish. So one of the other topics I really wanted to dive into on, and we've talked about this too, but as much as the fishing world has changed with electronics making things more expensive, and now, especially competitive guys, your average rod and reel combination is $400-500. But boats have become the latest topic, right? Boats have not gotten cheaper over the last 5-6 years. What's your thoughts on younger people getting into the sport with not only the cost of a new 20-foot boat being $80,000, but then, like you were talking before, people having 2 or 3 live scopes on there, $40,000 worth of electronics. I guess, what do you think the reasonable point is to try to keep people interested to where this is still an obtainable goal for them and not something you got to be a millionaire to go perform at?
Don't do tournament fishing. No, and what I mean by that is I got burnt out a little bit tournament fishing here a couple of years ago. I was going all the time. I was as much as I loved fishing, I wasn't being successful like I wanted to be. And you're putting all this time and this money and this effort, and I started to get burnt out of it. And tournament fishing is not easy. If you want to be aggressive about it and really try to be an excelling, proficient tournament angler, you got to put a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of dedication in it. And if you just go out there and say, I'm just going to fish one tournament a year and you expect to win, well, you probably should not expect to win.
Yeah, so here's a good one for you. I know what my budget is every year, but if you had to guess, and let's hope your wife doesn't listen to this, but if you had to guess how much money you spend a year to follow 2 trails, what do you think the budget is that somebody could reasonably set for themselves to fit? I think, if you're going to fish the Ohio River Challenge Trail, and that's the only trail you were going to fish, a $2,000 or $3,000 budget for the year would be more than enough to pay your entry fees and to pay for your gas.
Well, it depends. It depends how far you're traveling by truck, and then it depends how far you're going to travel by boat. So for me, I'm a 2-hour drive. It's a tank of gas, and it's all tank of gas for me to haul my boat and my truck over here. The entries are $125, so you're looking at $375 for 3 events. Plus the time and everything. If you live within, I'm going to say, if you live within an hour of the river and just in entry fees and gas in a vehicle, you can successfully fish the river with entry fees and the thing. I'm going to say you can do it in under $700 with 3 events. And that's gas to and from. Now that doesn't, and that also, if you make your own sandwich at the house, you get your food costs in. Now you bring in your boat costs.
Now boat fuel. I mean,
and it depends what kind of boat you're running and how far you're going to run. Ideally, I think most of us try to find fish as close to the ramp as possible, but I'm trying to do that more and more and more because,
Have you talked to John about his Suzuki and the fuel mileage he gets with that boat?
I know it's good.
Yeah, I was going to say, you talk about finding fish close. I was just talking to John the other day. I asked him, like, you've had this Suzuki on your Falcon for a full year now. What's your thoughts on it? And he said, well, it's about a mile or 2 an hour slower. He said, but it gets 2 to 3 more miles to the gallon. He said it's almost doubled his fuel mileage, and he said it's the most quiet motor he's ever fished with.
Yeah, I've seen them Suzukis now for about 4 years, and the trail and the championship. A guy has a Falcon from South Carolina with a Suzuki SS, and it would sit there and idle next to me. And he could leave it idling when we were doing the prayer, and you could barely hear it. You could actually hear it peeing in the water louder than the motor was idling itself.
That's wild.
It had, just as from what I saw performance-wise, it was he was satisfied, and we were riding next to each other in practice. And my Falcon, the same Falcon 205, I had a show and he had a Suzuki, and we were holding neck and neck the same. And I pulled away a little bit, and there as we were going, but I've spent a lot of time setting that Falcon up, and but I'm impressed with a Suzuki. It's hard for me to say I'm going to own a Suzuki because I'm a Yamaha guy, but
I'm right there with you.
But no, there's nothing wrong with that Suzuki, and I they're efficient, but to fish the trail, it's not a cheap man's sport to fish the tournament trail, but it's not a rich man's sport. You just need to be able to know your limits.
I'd like to encourage, if anybody listening to this, I'd really like to encourage people to go after more sponsors. I think that there's a lot more opportunity there than people imagine. And I really think we could grow this sport organically here in the Middle Ohio Valley. I'm telling you, there's people out there willing to sponsor. The biggest thing is you just have to show a way to tie in how their money and their investment benefits them whenever they put, their name on you. But if you were just wanting to fish a local trail around here like that, you could gather, $1,500 worth of sponsors pretty easy, believe it or not. And I think the more sponsors you bring into it, the more growth you'll see in the sport, because more businesses will get involved. Because, like Jan Dills, for instance, now that they're involved with sponsoring me, they have a lot more interest in the industry as a whole, because they're involved with me, and if they're investing money in me, they want to see where their money's going. Well, that's drawing 4 or 5 people from Jan Dills, this year that they're interested in fishing some local trails around here. The guys that's always fished, but now they're interested in fishing a trail. So I'd openly encourage anybody to go after some sponsors. Just don't go after mine.
Yeah, to fish 3 events, I said about $800 with expenses if you're within an hour's drive. But I think a good price point to think about setting aside or saving or budgeting or whatever is to fish 3 events plus the championship entry. I think if you set $2,000 aside, that's 4 events for a chance to win $25,000. I think that's
pretty good.
Because you got your fuel in the boat, you got your fuel in the vehicle, you got your food costs. If you do any pre-fishing, traveling to and from, like all that's factored in and everything. And, on my taxes, I actually keep track of all those expenses and stuff like that. So,
So I meant to ask you this the other day. I have a business license, and I thought that's like the only way I could go about writing all my stuff off. Do you have a bit, or you just write it off as like a contractor, just because you've...
the way I do it is I have it as a side business. It's not full time. It's a side job. And, anywhere there's technically any type of income you create, you're supposed to be taxed on in this world. So if there's an income, there's an expense.
I just didn't know if I can get rid of my business license and just write under my personal taxes instead of dealing with...
I can't answer that fully. 100%,
I need to find an accountant.
But yeah.
If there's one listening, you can email us.
Yeah, you'll have to reach out to them on that one.
So one of the last things I wanted to ask you, you've owned a lot of boats over the course of time you've been fishing. I know you've had a Stratus, I know you've had the Falcon. I know you had a couple other boats before the Stratus. How have you seen, what do you think the biggest changes are in boats over the last 10 or 15 years? And out of all the boats you've owned, which one's your favorite, and why is Falcon your favorite? I know Falcon's going to be the answer. I know you really like the Stratus you had too.
Well, I actually have only ever owned 4 bass boats, and they were old. I had actually a fiberglass bass boat that was a Bass Tracker TS Bassmaster Classic Edition, 1983.
I've seen one of those at the shop up there,
and
those are one of the ugliest boats I've ever seen.
In its time, it was the top of the line.
Oh yeah.
And now technology has changed. And then I had a Javelin Renegade, which was owned by Stratus, and a 20 SS, and it was nice. It was a quick boat. It was light. It wasn't the most stable thing in the world. And then I jumped into a Stratus 201 Pro XL 2005 model with a 250 Yami, and that was like going from a 4-banger pickup truck into a V8. I mean, it was night and day. You basically didn't have to pay attention to any waves on the river unless it was a barge wave. I mean, it cut the waves.
Hey, y'all. It's Jordan with the Getting Bit Fishing team, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thanks for checking out our podcast, The Last Cast, filmed in the one and only Ohio River Outdoors, located at 13520 Emerson Avenue, Williamstown, West Virginia. If you've never been here before, this place has absolutely everything a fisherman can need. Come swing by today. Come see Doug. Trust me, if you've never been before, it's worth the trip. Are you finally ready to buy that new pontoon boat for the family, or the new bass boat for yourself? Or maybe you even just need good, reliable, affordable service for the boat that you already have? Well, either way, you can get all of that at Seven Rivers Marine in Coolville, Ohio. Personally, I have trusted them with all of my marine needs for years, and honestly, you can't ask for a better group of people. Give them a call today at 740-846-0062. Again, that's 740-846-0062. Hey, Are you or somebody you know a veteran that needs help fighting the VA for the benefits that you deserve? If so, you need to give Jan Dills a call. I can say from personal experience that Jan Dills and her group of attorneys will fight for you to the bitter end. If you're fighting the VA, you need the attorneys that won't take no for an answer. Give Jan Dills a call today at 877-755-7183.
Turns. It was a cruise ship. I loved it. It was incredible. I went to Falcon because I'll never forget this. I was in Powhatan and I was in my Stratus and I was running on GPS 74.7. I'll never forget this. I looked down because I saw a boat coming up and I'm running 74.7 miles an hour. And yes, there's a lot of boats faster than that on the river. 100%. I'm not saying I'm a super fast boat on the river, but 74.7 on the river loaded in a tournament
Pretty
with
good speed.
live wells is a good speed.
Yeah.
And this boat passes me. And I went, and I looked down 74.7. That's a Falcon. What is a Falcon? Well, we get into the thing. It was John Thompson's Falcon. It was his personal Falcon. First one he had. And I walked over and I'm looking at it and I started asking him questions. And I saw the size of the deck on that boat.
Big deck.
And I went, wow. And I asked him if I can get on it. And he said, sure, go ahead. And he's like, you can buy it if you want. It's for sale. And it was a big joke. And my Stratus was next to it. My Stratus had just as long as a deck as the Falcon, but the Falcon was so much more wider, so much more fishability and space. And not to mention, he was faster than me. And, you know, I got a kind of like a little speed thing going in the back of my head. I like speed, I always have. But I like fishability. Well, moving down the road, 9 months later, I ordered a Falcon from him. The size of the deck of the Falcon and supporting local was the two major reasons, because I had made up in my mind I was going to get a new boat. I was going to treat myself to a new boat in this world. I wanted to order one, and I was torn, honestly, between a Skeeter or a Falcon. And I definitely 100% wanted a Yamaha. I didn't care for a Phoenix so much because a Phoenix still had a pretty narrow deck on it back in 2019.
They still do, depending on which one you buy.
And they still do which models. Yes.
Yeah,
Now, they've came a long way in the last couple of years, but I just Phoenixes are beautiful boats. They're fast. They're very attractive, but I wanted that big wide platform. I wanted space. I wanted a fishability. And it was simple.
Well, it was a 99.5-inch deck, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's
ridiculously big.
So I ordered a Falcon, and I love it. I love it. I've had some flaws with it. I've gotten through the kinks and stuff, but I love it. I still have it to this day. I'm gonna stay in it as long as I can, and it's a cruise ship. You know, it's a 205. I got it. It took me a while to get it set up with a prop, but I can run, you know, mid to high 70s with it loaded in a tournament load. And it's got a big deck on it. It's got a lot of storage space. And honestly, the main reason why I chose Falcon was to support local.
Yeah. And they do a good job there at Seven Rivers.
And that was the biggest drive, was I wanted to buy something local. And I really did not want to buy a Ranger. I wanted to support rights, but I did not want to buy a Ranger. And I loved Yamaha and Seven Rivers. I took the plunge with them, and they were working on my Yamaha prior to that on my Stratus. And I like the atmosphere of the people, and they've always was good to me and genuine. You know.
I was gonna say that was a good investment, honestly, because I know, just like me, you have a really good relationship with the Thompsons there at Seven Rivers.
They're just great people. You know? I mean, anytime I've ever needed something, they've been there. And anytime I've ever had a question or needed help, they've done it to the best of their abilities. And when I had my two-stroke Yamaha, my Stratus, there were some issues with it that I thought was going to cost hundreds, if not a couple thousand to fix. And they said, no, it's not that. It's this. And, you know, instead of they that told me right then and there, because I went in there with the idea that I was going to be spending about $1,200-1,500 for a new water coolant head and labor and parts and all that. It was something completely different, and that told me the kind of honesty they were 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Is that they were the kind of people that they just told me they could fix my boat for under $200,
Way less than what you was offering.
So that carried heavy in my heart, that these are honest people and they're genuine, and
they're really involved in this community, the fishing.
And then moving forward, they're still the same people, and if you buy from them, they'll go above and beyond.
Yeah, I can tell you firsthand, and I know you have similar experiences, but if you're like me or you, and you have the tendency to be hard on a boat occasionally and have issues with lower units or something like that, especially if you bought a boat from them, or if you're somebody that services with them all the time, if there's any reasonable way to have you back in that boat, functional, ready to go, the same week, if you have a tournament, those guys will stay late any day of the week. They put a lot of their own stuff aside to get people back out in the water and competing. So, yeah, supporting local, there's a lot of benefits behind it, because not only do they take really good care of you, but too, if you have any issues with that boat, it's a lot better than driving 4, 5, 6 hours wherever you bought it from to have it. Because one of my really good friends, he bought a brand new Skeeter. Sorry, it was a year old when he bought it, but the Yamaha only had like 30 hours on it, and he blew it. And
wow, that's weird.
Oh, even Yamaha said, you're the first, right? Like, they're like, nobody's ever done this. But in order to get it warrantied, he had to drive all the way back to South Carolina where he bought the boat. And again, he loves his Skeeter, but if you would have bought local instead of driving all the way back there to have whatever the issue was taken care of, you could have been a 30-minute drive to Seven Rivers. You know what I mean? It's a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, I'll if and this is just hypothetical. If they ever change brands and don't carry Falcon and they carry Skeeter, or they carry Bass Cat or something else, I'll probably, if I ever go to buy a new boat, I'll just support whatever they're selling, because that's just how I am.
I'm right there with you. So don't get me wrong. I love my Falcon. Seven Rivers really set me up really good with that, and it's a beautiful boat, handles rough water great, like you said, huge deck, a lot of power, a lot of speed, maneuverability, and it fishes. It's the shallowest fishing boat I've ever owned, aside from maybe a flat bottom aluminum boat. But yeah, to your point, even if they just dropped Falcon and went to Express only or something, I'd follow Seven Rivers through whatever brand they went through, even though I really love my Falcon. I love Seven Rivers a lot more. They never have had a complaint there, and I don't know anybody that has.
With today's technology, the biggest trend I'm seeing in all these bass boats coming out is they're all trying to get to that maximum deck size now. Even your more narrow traditional boats, like a Bullet is.
Yeah, I've seen a new Bullet.
The newer Bullets, they have an enormous deck on them.
Gamblers even came.
Well, Gamblers shut back down again, but they
really?
came out. Yeah, they came out with another concept here a couple of years ago, and their deck was actually bigger than Falcon's. But now Gambler went under again, and I don't know the whole ins and outs. I just know there was a lot involved there. But like the new Skeeters have a huge deck, the new Bass Cats have a huge deck, and Phoenix has came out with and Triton have came out with these larger, wider deck boats now. So, moving forward into what boat's the best, I truly don't know what boat is the best boat in this world, because they're all so competitive. I think there's a substantial difference between certain brands, but as far as preference and things, I think a lot of it is also the type of fishing. Like, if you're fishing the Great Lakes and that's all you fish is the big Great Lakes up there, you're probably going to want to look at a big Bass Cat or an Icon or
my Falcon handles,
or a Predator, a 21 Predator. You're going to want to buy a bigger boat, because that's the kind of atmosphere you're in. I've always jokingly said, if I ever moved back up to New York and I'm doing tournaments on them, I'll probably buy a center console Boston Whaler. and you laugh about it, but
yeah.
I'll probably buy a 22, 24 foot Boston Whaler center console with a 300 on it, and I'll run that instead of a bass boat. It's just,
it's more practical.
It's more practical for that situation.
Yeah.
But, no, so I love my boat, and it gets in some. I literally, so you can probably see these boots here. I can take my Falcon and push it across sandbars and not put boot in that water. I've done it. I've done it up north in PA, and that boat will draft in 12 to 13 inches of water with a medium to light load. It's incredible how shallow they can get in. But yet when you get out on the water, the way that they got those 3 stringers underneath and the way it displaces the water when it impacts, it keeps the deck dry for the most part.
I was going to say, this is one of the driest rides I've ever had in a boat.
It is.
It's hard to drown it out. It really is. And if there's anybody that can drown a boat out, it's me.
I've speared a couple in St. Clair, and I speared. It was real bad at Gunnersville one year, and I've taken some water in, but for the most part, it's a very impressive boat. I would recommend anybody looking for a new boat to go ride in a Falcon. And I'm not just saying that because of Seven Rivers or because I own it. It's because I've rode in other boats in some really sticky situations, and I can relate to how much it handles. And they are definitely, to me, an underrated boat right now.
Was it St. Clair that you and Tyler fished at together?
No, we fished Lake Ontario together.
Yeah, I was going to say that day there should have been a good testament to how much a Falcon can handle. You guys had a pretty sketchy situation there coming back, didn't you?
Yep, 38 miles. It was only supposed to be 10 to 15 mile an hour winds, and an hour and a half into our fishing, it was about 35, 40, and well, Tyler's taller than me, and when we're both standing on the deck of the boat and the waves are higher in our heads and we're falling into the saddles, he's like, "We need to get out of here." And I said, "Yeah," and we left. It took us a couple busted knuckles, and I'm not gonna lie, it broke some stuff on the boat, but no boat can withstand that kind of stuff. You know, we were actually kind of concerned for our safety getting back, and the only thing we cared about was getting inside that bay. The weather grew on that lake angry, and we took a crosswind the whole way, and Tyler can testify to this. Until we got about the last 3 miles away where we were protected by the wind, I don't think I ever had that boat above 35 mile an hour. There was no sweet spot. You'd come up 6-7 feet and the whole boat would fall down and hit in the bottom of the gap of the saddle. I mean, it was some of the most violent waves I've ever been. Only other time I've ever been in waves like that ever was honestly at Gunnersville of all places, for about a half a mile stretch coming out of a north wind down the middle of the river. But it was sketchy, and
Thank God you guys made it out there alive.
Yeah, I mean, I had faith that we were going to make it. You know, Tyler had said he had never been in that kind of rough water, and I said, "Just trust me, we'll get out of here. It's just not going to be a nice ride." And I busted a graph off the front. I had some spider cracking going on, but that was not anything a bass boat should have ever been in. And the weather did not do what they said. Him and I specifically checked the weather that morning before we went out because we had one heck of a largemouth pattern put together. And we got out there and actually never caught a fish that morning. We went 38 miles back, and then we hammered the largemouth and got on our largemouth pattern. We didn't even need to lead them.
Yeah, we went all through even the fish were smart enough to stay back that day.
We ended up finishing second overall in that qualifier, and if we both even said we didn't even need to go out there. We could have just hammered them largemouth for 2 days and done it. But we had a good time up there.
Yeah. But
he got to see firsthand what them boats can do up on that water. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's a true testament to what those boats can withstand. Because, like you said, no boat should have went through that. And the Falcon, it came out with a little bit of battle marks on it, but she still came out ahead.
Actually, there was a guy up there with a brand new 2024 Phoenix HPX, and he busted a power pole off the back. He lost 2 graphs, and. Like I said, no boats can withstand that. I don't care. No fiberglass bass boats can handle that kind of stuff.
So. But, well, anyways, man, so we've been here for a little over an hour now. Probably time to start wrapping this thing up. Before we do, though, is there any big news that I missed out on or any big announcements that you have about either one of your trails? I know for the people listening, if you do fish the Ohio River Challenge Trail and you're looking to travel a little bit more, maybe you got some money in the bank, or even if you just want to pick off a couple of the tournaments, the Ohio or the West Virginia Ohio Fishers and Men Trail, I followed it for about 3 years now. I think it's been 3 years. But fish some amazing lakes. You're not doing Smith Mountain this year, are you?
Well, actually, I just got an email out in the parking lot before I came in here today. I just got denied a 3rd time on Smith Mountain, and her email stated, "We have more tournaments scheduled this year than ever before." I'm struggling to schedule our last 2 events. So now that Smith Mountain has been eliminated, I'm going to look into Lake Anna. If I can't get on Lake Anna, we're going to do a Lake Erie event in the end of August. But
what about the Yacht? Have you put any thought into doing the Yacht?
it all comes down to permits and time.
Oh.
Time frame's very hard, and permits in certain times of the year.
North Bend. Just do it in North Bend.
But no, I am. For those who don't know, I am the director of the Fishers of Men National Trail out of West Virginia. We have a national championship that you compete for bass cat bass boats. They give out bass cat bass boats. We are a nonprofit Christian organization. We don't fish Sundays. We fish Saturdays or during the week.
Fridays and Saturdays, a lot of the times.
We do 6 events.
Three weekends.
Over 3 weekends. We do 6 events. Best 5 out of 6 events with points wins points to go to the national championship. Or if you fish 3 events, you can go to a qualifier. If you fish 5 events of any Fishers of Men across the country, you can go to any qualifier. And it's a really cool thing. We voted as a trail, instead of doing 6 different events on 6 different lakes, we knock out 3 weekends and do 2 days on each lake, and opens up the rest of our schedule for other stuff. But right now,
a lot of nice lakes.
Right now, we do Stonewall on May 30th and May 31st this year.
I'll probably be there for that one.
We always do Stonewall. That's just a staple in the state of West Virginia. To me, it is the best fishery in the state that you can run a big motor on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the trail loves Chautauqua Lake. That lake,
I love Chautauqua.
That lake is an incredible lake. I mean, anymore, if you don't bring 20 pounds to the scales, you're not even going to land in the top 10, and that's a fact. We had several bags in the 24 to 26 pound range the last 2 years, and it's both large and smallmouth. We had several teams this past August bring in, 21 to 24 pound bags of smallies. It was unbelievable. But
Chautauqua this year was, for the first time ever, a letdown for me. I went there really thinking we had a good chance of winning, flipping boat dock. I've just learned so much there over the last couple of years. I was really hoping. The predominant pattern's always been boat docks there.
Boat docks is key there, but the drought, the water was down, and the drought and the temperatures and the algae set in, and it killed the dock bite. And I went to that lake with the only idea in mind was me and my other half. She fished with me, and I had her so pumped about flipping docks. And when we went there, dock bite was very slow.
Terrible.
And in practice, I went to 5 sets of docks and had 17 pounds in 5 sets of docks. And I said, okay, they're here, but they're not here in numbers. And we went out on day 1 and we weighed in 16 pounds and some change flipping docks. And on day 2, we weighed in 14 pounds and change flipping docks. Of course, we were nowhere near the top because them guys were all bringing in 20-pound bags.
I was going to say Thompson's were bringing in 23, 24-pound bags.
And then Miles and Chris Johnson and Will, they all brought in big bags. But the dock bite there, you had to be on deeper docks, and you had to be on docks that didn't have the algae, and that's the only thing we targeted was docks. And we caught a lot of fish actually the 2 days off of docks, but it wasn't like it normally was. But we're doing Chautauqua this year, August 1st and 2nd. Permits are approved there, and right now I'm trying to do the last 2 events, and it looks like I'm going tomorrow. I'm gonna be contacting Lake Anna to try to book a tournament right around the 2nd week of May in Lake Anna if I can get a permit.
Yeah, make sure if you're interested too, you can find that on West Virginia, Ohio Fishers of Men on Facebook.
Yep.
The Getting Bit Fishing team follows it, so you can find it off of our page. One last thing before we hop off here, man, since there's no major rule changes or anything like that coming up, I always ask at the end of the podcast for whoever the guest is to kind of tie in how fishing or just being in nature in general has made your relationship with God closer, and then vice versa, having a relationship with God, how that's made nature more enjoyable. It's kind of hard to put into words, but I always ask for somebody to, I guess, describe maybe a situation or a time whenever you realized, or maybe how doing this made you realize what God's beauty is, that kind of thing. I
mean, if you just go out on the water and you just stop for a second, you just look around and you listen. I mean, God's creation is incredible. I don't know what it would be like without it. When I fish, whether it's in a tournament or not, I'm at peace for the most part. It can get a little stressful in tournaments and stuff, but it's beauty and its creation, and you can see truly that it took a God. It had to have taken a God to create the fisheries and the fish and the mountains and the streams and all that, and the way the leaves change in the fall. And I believe in our God, the only God, the one and only, the Lord Jesus Christ. And I believe that there is a God, and that he is the God, and that he's created that. And, when you get on a body of water at daybreak and you see the different colors, or in the evenings in the fall, and the leaves and stuff, it's just mesmerized me. It takes your breath away to see the beauty, and it's so surreal, and it takes an almighty creator.
And we get to do it every weekend.
Well,
Yeah,
sometimes if we can.
Well, anyways, brother, I really appreciate you coming out to do the podcast. I'm sure everybody that fishes the trail, especially, like I said, we have 200 some guys that fish this trail. So I'm sure a lot of people have had questions or maybe some concerns leading up, since there's a new change in leadership. But as we found out, for the most part, leadership's really the same, except for you're the new guy at the head of it, but there's still the same body of people helping make the decisions. You have plenty of experience running a trail, so I'm honestly looking forward to it. Looking forward to fishing a little bit of the Fishers and Men Trail this year. And like I said, I appreciate you coming out here, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. As far as the trail, there really is no great changes. Off limits is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on the Bass Festival. No off limits on the Ohio River Trail, and the Ohio River Challenge is Monday to Friday prior to the championship of the challenge is off limits. But other than that, there's no off limits there. The amount of fish still stay the same. You're only allowed one substitution on the trail, and you must fish with a partner. And
you must fish with a partner at the challenge,
at the championship.
Yeah, but you can fish without a partner for the other three events.
And you
just have to have your partner designated when you start the season.
Yep, you got it. Whoever, if you for some reason you got a partner in mind, but he just cannot. He just cannot make any of the three events. That's fine, but you got to state who that partner is in the very beginning. And then, the rules with the locks is that's at your own discretion. We have no ties or anything with that. And other than that, there's just really no change in rules or anything. Payouts are the same, and all that stuff. So
it's going to be a good season.
It should be. Hopefully, I have a feeling we're going to have a wet season. I have a feeling we've had a pretty mild, dry season, so I have a feeling we're going to be dealing with a wet spring this year based on the winter we're having. But
yeah, it's all part of the game, man.
Yeah, that's one of them variables.
It's all part of the game. Well, everybody watching this, we appreciate you tuning in. Again, we really appreciate Dustin coming out here, because I know it's a long drive. And most of all, we appreciate Jan Dills for making this podcast happen, and we appreciate Doug at Ohio River Outdoors for letting us host it here at this facility. For any of you who haven't checked out Ohio River Outdoors, it's bigger than any Bass Pro Shop that you've ever found, and it has more fishing gear from wall to wall than you could ever imagine. It's an adult playground. So we'll see y'all next time, and look forward to it.